Afraid won't let you fall, girl. Don't be afraid, won't let you fall, girl.
Welcome to this week's installment of Lift Free Online. We're going to get started today with our snatch progression work. As the weeks have progressed, we've slowly been getting used to doing muscle snatches, snatch balances, overhead squats to prepare our body for the snatch. Because the snatch is so intricate and so technical, it's always helpful to do a movement prior to your main snatch movement to kind of break down the lift and make sure that your coordination is primed before we get into the snatch work. That's why it's so important to actually take proper progressions and proper warm-ups prior to getting into your snatch. Your body needs the repetitions, your body needs to understand where you want the bar to go and how you're supposed to be moving the bar. So today we're gonna start with some hang muscle snatches. I do want no touching at the hip during these hang muscle snatches, and we're going to support that with an overhead squat as well, just to get your body used to getting nice and deep and low into your squat of your snatch. With the no touch, the main reason why we do this is to ensure that you're not getting all of your momentum from the bar hitting your hips. You're getting momentum from you utilizing the proper sequence at the exact right time. So as I open my hips and as I shrug my shoulders and begin to pull on the bar, all of those things are sequentially happening, one right after the next, very, very close together as well. So as I open my hips, I'm creating momentum on the barbell. I use my legs to create that speed. I then start to create that upward trajectory by allowing my shoulders to start moving up right before I start pulling with my arms, and then I properly get underneath that bar so that I can move into my press. I would highly suggest doing these repetitions with a PVC pipe or an empty bar first. Start to understand that your body is moving the bar not by utilizing that bang of the hips, but by utilizing the proper sequence. So I'm going to get started in my snatch grip. Remember, as we get started with that grip, we're turning our pointer fingers to pull into the bar, so our elbows should be pointed out to the outsides of the room. We're making sure that they're not drifting backwards. Otherwise, as soon as we go to open the hips and we start to pull, the elbows go back and the bar goes out and away. So to mitigate that, I'm going to turn my hand, point my elbows out to the side, and then right as I open my hips, that barbell is going to start coming up my chest immediately. As I push into that hang, the more that we've worked into this, hopefully you guys are getting more used to the positioning in your foot. When my hips move back and I lean down to that top of the knee, just make sure that when you're moving your back and you're hinging your hips, it's not pulling your toes off the ground. So I'm making sure that all of my weight is centered right in the ball of my foot, so right exactly where your toes meet the whole meat of the foot. So my chest is up, elbows are out, arms are completely relaxed. Soft bend in the knees. Remember that the knees go out to the side. I'm not pushing my knees out in front. or else it's going to drift my body weight into my toes. I also lose a lot of the activation of my hamstrings and my glutes when my feet go, or when my knees go forward. When I'm able to kind of sit myself back, hinge my hips, and just create that little bit of a knee bend, now you're really utilizing that big, strong pull of the hamstring, which is gonna get all of the muscles firing to go into your hang snatch. So chest is up, elbows out, weight centered in my feet, knees slightly bent. I'm gonna push my hips back, lean down to the top of the knee, just making sure that my shoulders stay over in the bar, stay in front of the bar. Anytime that bar gets out and in front, now again, we lose those hamstrings. Keep everything nice and tight. I'm gonna slowly start to stand. Remember to start bringing the knees underneath the bar. As I extend upward, I'm not utilizing this bang of the bar, but it will kind of brush past my hips. I'm gonna start to extend, elbows and shoulders move up, elbows complete the motion. As I get to this position, now I'm trying to get as quickly back down to my heels as I can, so when I transition underneath, I have a very strong press into that motion. For your rep scheme, you guys are doing 4 of these. Just making sure that none of them bang into your hips. After you do 4, you bring your stance out nice and wide. Come down to that overhead squat. Make sure that you're not pulling the bar back, getting it out of your center of gravity. You're pulling everything out, making sure that it is stacked over your shoulders, which should be stacked over the middle of your quad and the middle of your foot once you guys get into that bottom of your squat position. So I got 4 of those. Again, if you are new to the no touch work, I would highly suggest using something light. Because it is such high volume as well, this is mainly used to just prime the central nervous system. So don't worry about the weight that's on the bar. Take your time with this. I'm going to mostly do my reps with empty barbell. Maybe on my last set, I'll build up in weight so then I can be prepared for the next power snatch progression. Moving on to our power snatches. We are now going to go from the floor. We're going to still keep these as a no touch. So we're adding the dynamic component of actually having to move your feet without utilizing the touch. So this is going to make sure that you are properly using your legs to create power off the floor. You're properly adding speed into the bar after it passes your knees. You're utilizing your hips in the proper way, so you're not banging your hips into the bar. You're actually going up with the bar, spending a good amount of time allowing the bar to start moving upwards. This is usually where people skip past this part because they're trying to be too fast. A lot of times I see it, this is usually like a shortened extension, but even when you open your hips all the way, there is a slight moment where that bar needs to start moving upwards before you're able to start moving under the bar. If you cheat that, you move under the bar too fast, you're never going to get the bar to start moving upwards properly, and you're not going to get the bar as high as you possibly could. So we have to allow that bar to start coming up. This is usually where coaches cue the shrugging component of the lift. You don't have to actually physically concentrate on the shrug as long as your hips are moving upward. So as long as you are extending up with the bar, as long as you're keeping your arms relaxed, that bar will actually shrug your shoulders itself. So it's one component you can kind of take out of the lift that you don't have to think about anymore, if done properly. This drill is really gonna help emphasize that. So we're gonna start moving that bar up. Shoulders are gonna naturally come up. Now we gotta start actively pulling on the bar up and pulling ourselves underneath the bar. So everything happens very quickly after the patience part of the lift. So after we are taking our time and letting that bar start to move upwards. This is typically why Olympic lifting is a very frustrating sport, because there's so many things that go into one tiny portion of the lift. So this is really gonna help us make sure that you are moving sequentially in the proper order and nothing is happening before it's supposed to start happening. We will be able to see if you start early elbow bending, if you start actually moving your feet before you've reached extension, if you start dropping under the bar before you finish your extension. All of those things will be heightened because there's no touching of the bar, and there won't be that little hang time portion of the bar because you have to constantly be moving the bar either up or moving your body down, all at the same period, or all at the same amount of time. We're going to do 6 sets of 2 repetitions of these. Start light. If you guys didn't have that hard of a time with the hang muscle snatch, just remember we now are going from the floor, so it's going to increase the difficulty a little bit. It's going to add another element to this. So move yourself down in weight for these power snatches if you feel comfortable with it. If the movement looks good, if it feels good, then feel free to go ahead and build in weight throughout these 6 sets. Moving into our clean work, we are going to do 2 cleans and 2 push presses for 5 sets. I want the main focus of this work to be on your push press. Very commonly, hopefully this is the case, you should be able to clean much more than you can push press, since the push press is going up and overhead and the clean is just getting underneath the bar and standing it. Ideally, the legs will be stronger than the upper body in Olympic weightlifting. That being said, I don't want you to forget completely about the clean. I still want good technique. I still want good movement patterns. I still want us picking up from the progressions of the previous weeks that we've learned. So with the clean, the bar's coming off the floor. We're taking it nice, slow, and steady, just making sure that your positioning is holding all the way through this lift. As soon as the bar gets past the knees, we start to add speed. We keep the bar very close to the thighs, should almost be scratching up the thighs. Once we get to that contact point, we start our extension. We now add speed to the bar, and the most important part of the clean is you're pulling yourself and the bar to your shoulders. You're not pulling the bar up any higher. You're not getting the bar up as high as you can and getting underneath it as fast as possible. You are bringing that bar directly to your shoulders and catching it as strong and as upright as possible. So you're preparing for that weight to come down on top of your shoulders at wherever you need to meet it. So if the weight is light, you should be making that contact and that connection point much higher than if the weight was heavier. Getting into the push press, once you stand that weight up, we're going from a front rack position or a really strong catch position into a pushing position. If we keep our elbows too high in our front rack position as we go to press, there's so much movement that happens on the bar. So if I'm up in this front rack position, I can't really get this thing. Yeah, that should work. All right, if I'm up in this front rack position, I want you to watch my elbows, right? So if this bar is fully in my hands, which is hard to do with a PVC pipe, and I go to press, what happens immediately from this position, I start pressing right about here. There's so much movement that has to happen with the elbows. So now my elbows are gonna start to drift out. The bar is now going to drift from my fingertips into my palms, and now I'm gonna start pressing. So with so much movement from the elbows moving down and out, there's also a ton of movement from the shoulders, which is your strong rack position. So if I'm going into a dynamic component like a push press, a push jerk, a split jerk, anytime there's downward movement in my dynamic movement, the bar is slightly going to drop. And when you're trying to get that thing up and overhead, you don't want any part of the bar dropping or any part of your body dropping. So instead of starting your press from that front rack position, I want you to get used to bringing the elbows down and to the outside. This doesn't mean that they're going to drift back behind the bar. It just means that we are taking our rack position from having our lats almost turned off here into having our lats support the shoulder. So in my dip and drive, nothing moves from my rack position. So again, from here now to here is my push position, my jerk position. Elbows are down into the outside. If I turn sideways to you, you guys can see that my elbows are out in front of the bar. So now when I go down into that dip, nothing moves. Everything is super stacked and strong. So when I go to drive, all of the power that I'm getting from my legs goes up into the bar. I want you just to take a look at where I'm pressing. So when I'm in this good position for a shoulder to overhead, as soon as I start pressing, nothing happens with the elbows except the bar just keeps moving upwards. That's what we're looking for when you're going into this work. So again, touching on the clean, we'll start from the floor. Chest is up, elbows are out just like we did in the power snatch. Hips are down a little bit lower than in the snatch. Once I'm in this position, I start pushing through my feet. Bar gets to my knees, I start to create some power. Extend at the hips. Bar starts moving up just as it did in the snatch. As I bring that thing up as high as I can, my feet are gonna start moving out. I'm gonna start to pull that bar up on top of the shoulder, make good contact connection, come all the way down, stand. Because I have two cleans, I will drop it and then go right into my second rep of my clean. Same exact thing. Once I'm up in my second rep, now I move my rack position, bring my feet back underneath me, okay? So now we practice this positioning. As I dip, nothing changes in the torso. My angle doesn't change, my chest stays up. I dip directly down and drive directly up into the bar. So once I'm here, slight little dip, strong drive, strong press. Same as your muscle snatch, try to get your heels down as quick as you possibly can. After we reach that full extension, you're trying to jam your feet back down into the ground so you can start pressing back up into the barbell. We have 5 sets of this, 2 cleans, full cleans, and 2 push presses. To finish up our work today, we are going to practice a push jerk going into a split jerk. So even if you are a pusher, a power jerker, or a squat jerker, I do want you practicing the split. It's important to understand how to do this and what the focus is when we do go into the split jerk, just so you guys have a good frame of reference. For the push jerk and the split jerk, our dip and our drive remains the exact same as in our push press. We keep our weight position back. We shouldn't feel much of the toes on the ground, but you should kind of feel that balance pushing in throughout the entire foot. As we dip, our elbows stay out in front of us. They stay nice, wide, and spread apart. So once we do go into that pushing position, there's no movement coming from the elbow or the front rack position. With the push jerks today, I don't want your feet moving. I want you to understand how to add speed into the bar, get underneath fast, and support the bar up and overhead. So in our dip and drive, we're keeping our weight centered mostly back, positioned mostly back on your foot. As I dip, I should feel my whole foot pushing into the ground, so my heels should not be lifting, my toes should not be lifting. As I drive, I'm finishing my drive and then immediately getting back down into pretty much the exact same position as the bottom of your dip. So I'm dipping, driving, getting underneath, and supporting that load up and overhead. When we don't move our feet, the bar doesn't have that frame of reference where it starts to kind of hover overhead. It's going to hit the peak point that your legs put the power into it, and then it's immediately going to start going back down. So you have to get to the bottom position and be ready to support the load overhead very quickly when we're not allowing you to move your feet. Once you complete 2 of those reps, you bring the bar back down, and now you have 3 split jerks. Since we're doing 5 shouldered overheads in this complex, I don't want the weight to be heavy. I want it to be about the same as what you were push pressing in the clean and the push press, to make sure that you're getting all of the repetitions in and making sure that each and every single one of them is as consistent as possible, because that is the #1 goal of Olympic weightlifting, is to keep your lifts consistent. So going into your push jerk, bringing yourself back from the rack, elbows are nice and wide. I'm going to dip and drive, drop underneath the bar, bring it back down to the shoulders. Give one more, dip, drive, get underneath that bar, back down to the shoulders. Since your feet are a little bit wider in your push jerk because you're coming underneath into the catch, I do want you bringing your stance in slightly for your split jerk. Same thing, dip, drive. Once we hit that peak extension, you're now moving your feet. Back leg moves slightly out at an angle, front leg moves slightly out at an angle. So now when we land, we're in a wider position and we're not caught tight roping. When an athlete has that issue where they're catching very narrow, what I usually tell them is just to focus on your front leg. So if we're focusing on both of the legs at the same time, a lot of times one leg will go straight back, and even if this one comes out a little bit, you're still kind of left on that tightrope. If you only focus on stepping this front leg slightly out at an angle, even if this one goes straight back and this one goes out, you're still gonna land in a much wider position to give yourself a better base to catch from. The main difference and the main benefit of the split jerk is there's a little bit more room for variance. So if you slightly accidentally drive the bar forward, if you drive the bar too far back, you have a little bit of room to move your center of gravity underneath the bar. So when I'm stacked and positioned underneath this bar, if the bar is slightly in front, I have the ability to kind of push through my back toe and push myself forward. If the bar is a little bit back, I can push a little bit back further with my front foot. I have a little bit more wiggle room. When doing the push jerk or the squat jerk, if that bar is a little in front or the bar is a little behind, your feet are already parallel to one another, and it's gonna be really hard for you to walk your center of gravity back underneath that bar since you don't have that wider base. So that's typically the benefit of doing a split jerk. I do want you to test them out, try them out if you're not used to them, just to get yourself a good rhythm, because maybe you might get more comfortable with the split jerk the more that you practice it. Go ahead and finish your sets here. 2 push jerks, 3 split jerks, 5 sets, and that's gonna be the last exercise that we do.